The danger is that it will become a license for a lawless executive, and I would suggest we've experienced that in the recent past, a license to act in ways that are beyond anyone's expectation and beyond the pale, frankly.
Welcome to the Stakes for Democracy. I'm Brad Rourke with the Charles F. Kettering Foundation. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan operating foundation that focuses on advancing and defending inclusive democracy. Today, I'm talking to Kettering Senior Fellow and former FBI Director James Comey and former member of Congress from Maryland, Donna Edwards. Jim, Donna, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me on, Brad.
Thank you, Brad. Good to be with you.
On July 1st, the Supreme Court decided in a 6-3 opinion that former presidents have sweeping immunity from criminal prosecution. They already had immunity on the civil side, but this was from criminal prosecution. And Chief Justice Roberts' majority opinion held that if a president's exerting core powers that are in the Constitution, they have absolute immunity. That if they're engaging in official duties, they have a presumption of immunity that the courts need to take into account. James Comey, as former director of the FBI and a U.S. attorney, you were a member of one of these core power agencies, Justice. Talk to us about the effects of this ruling of absolute immunity.
Yeah, the danger, well, first of all, I should say the opinion, in my view, is wrong, but it's not nuts. That is, most serious people acknowledge that at the core of the presidency are responsibilities given only to the president by the United States Constitution. And so the logic goes, if they're given only to the president, then they can't be legislated about, cabined, restricted, extended by another branch of government or adjudicated by the courts. I get that. I got that in law school. And so it makes sense that there is a core responsibility that can't be the subject of law imposed from outside the United States Constitution and therefore prosecution under a law. So the responsibility of the president it makes sense that there's a core set of responsibilities that can't be the subject of those things. The danger is that it will become a license for a lawless executive, and I would suggest we've experienced that in the recent past, a license to act in ways that are beyond anyone's expectation and beyond the pale, frankly. And so that's the central concern about this opinion. The good news is, and this is why I've been a little less concerned about it than a lot of folks in the public square, is that no president is able to act without the assistance of others. And so the president may have absolute immunity for actions, but the things he asks you to do on his behalf, you, government official, have absolutely no immunity. And if you look at Robert Mueller's report examining the potential obstruction of justice by Donald Trump during the early part of his tenure as president, a lot of times what happened is the people around him refused to do stuff for that very reason, that they didn't know whether he'd have immunity, but they sure as hell knew they would not have immunity and could lose their bar license or go to jail for engaging in behaviors on his behalf. In a way, that may be our saving grace, given the license that the Supreme Court decision appears to offer future presidents. They still need to have help, and those helpers are going to be in enormous trouble. Now, you could say, well, maybe they could be pardoned. Maybe. It would depend upon when the prosecution was brought and who brought it and where. But I take some comfort from the fact that no president can order and then carry out unlawful behavior on his or her own.
One of the big effects of the ruling is that it seems to recast the balance of power between executive, legislative, and judicial branches. So the judicial branch is now more powerful. Outside of the president's core powers, there's a set of official acts where the judicial branch will be deciding, is there immunity and is there not, and the presumption is there will be. Donna Edwards, former member of Congress, where does this leave Congress?
Well, I think there are a couple of options. And I think, like Jim, one of the things that I'm concerned about is how that analysis of official versus unofficial acts is going to be conducted. It does mean that, lawyers are going to have to make an argument, and a very compelling one, in order to cross that threshold. I do think Congress has some options. One, Congress has the ability to legislate what constitutes a core group of official versus unofficial acts. I mean, the Congress, for example, could legislate around, homicide of various types. That was one of the questions in the ruling. The Congress has the ability, as we've seen proposals coming forward, to put some constraints on the judiciary, to change the way we think about the Supreme Court in terms of lifetime appointments and scope. So there are some options, and I think that if there are significant majorities in the House and the Senate, especially among Democrats and a White House, I think that we are going to see some of these reforms go forward. And apart from that, I also believe that up until 2016, there were so many things that we thought were just, behaviors of an executive that were norms that were not law. And I think Congress has the ability now to go back and look at things that we examined as norms and to make those law, because, otherwise you can't account for a lawless president.
Led by the Heritage Foundation, a number of conservative think tanks have put together something called Project 2025, in the news a lot lately. It's a very detailed blueprint for what a conservative new presidential administration might do. And we've been looking at some of the details here on the show. One aspect of it, and it's not unique to Project 2025, is bringing back something called Schedule F, which removes civil service protection for a number of federal workers and would make them political appointees. James Comey, what would this have done to the Justice Department?
Well, I don't know for sure. Well, first of all, let me say, in every presidential administration, there's a desire in the political layer, which is a small layer at the top of the deep lake that is our federal government, not deep state, deep lake. And below that frothy political layer is the calmer, cooler, in my view, stabilizing layer that are the career civil servants who are acting based on law and regulation and not politics, which governs the top layer. Every administration of both parties wants to have the top layer be able to shape the bottom layer better to accomplish their policy goals. Okay, I get it. It's legitimate. But what I feel in this Project 2025 effort is something that is born of regret from the first Trump administration, and that is we didn't do a good enough job of controlling those who exercise the investigative and prosecutive power of the United States. Now, that power has always, well, since Watergate especially, has resided below the political layer. So the decisions are made based on facts and law. And the desire of those close to the last president was to have more influence on those things. I think what's motivating this particular project is to come back smarter and figure out ways to influence more the activity that's normally confined to the cool, stabilizing, apolitical layer when it comes to who should be investigated and who should be prosecuted. That was reflected in a dinner I had with our last president, one-on-one, as close as I am now to the camera, where he wanted me to pledge personal loyalty to him. And this isn't about his personality or my personality. It's about the American people not wanting investigations and prosecutions to be governed anything other than by facts and the law. We depict Lady Justice with a blindfold for a good reason in this country. And to move the decisions about fact gathering and the nitty-gritty decisions about investigations plainly into that top frothy political layer, which is what I understand this Schedule F would allow them to do, would fundamentally alter the way in which we think about justice in this country.
If I might, and gently and respectfully push back a little bit, it absolutely any administration would want to have more control over the administrative bureaucracy. Project 2025 as one of its core pillars, what it calls dismantling the administrative state, which sounds to me like it goes beyond simply having more control over the apparatus. What do you say to that?
Again, it's hard. I'm no expert in the way people use political language. I'm sure that's red meat for their political base. We're going to dismantle the administrative state. What I take them to mean is we're going to extend our control deeper than it used to be so that we are not being thwarted by people who say crazy things like, well, the facts aren't there, sir, or the law wouldn't permit that. Instead, we'll have people who are making those judgments based on what those above would like to have happen. So it's always a question of degree, but that language, even if it's exaggerated on purpose, to me signals a desire to go deeper into the stabilizing, below the thermocline. I always say to people, if you jumped in a lake in the summertime, it's warm and frothy at the first 3 feet, and then it gets ice cold. There's goodness in that cold because it's a stabilizing, law-bound, fact-driven ballast that holds our country in a good place.
Donna Edwards, weigh in here on the dismantling of the administrative state.
Well, I mean, I've had a chance to take a look at all the 900 plus pages of Project 2025. I mean, what's amazing to me is that people actually decided to put this in writing, to say, you don't have to guess at what our plan is because we've laid it all out for you. Here's the thing. One of the things that our civil servants do, as Jim said, is that they are there, they're tried and true, they stay in their jobs, it doesn't matter what, whether it's a Republican or Democratic administration. And when you begin to remove that layer of civil servants, what you do is you subject everything to a political consideration. And so, whether it's the scientists at NASA or it's the engineers and environmentalists at the EPA or in transportation, that every one of these agencies that relies on civil servants to make grants and give out resources to states and localities, or to make sure that you have a regulatory process that really works and is fair, all of that would become subject to political consideration if you begin to move the political realm all the way down through the civil service, and more than that, to actually get rid of those civil servants and then replace them with political officials. It also means that if you have an appointee who isn't doing what you want in that state, whether it's a regulation or implementation, you just remove that person and put another political appointee in those positions. And I think that this is the way in which you would dismantle the administrative state. It's a way of saying that every single agency, from education to justice to environment, would all be subject to political considerations in their operations. And I think that would be a real danger to the way that we look at government and the role that it plays in our lives. We depend on agencies making regulations that have to do with food safety or otherwise. We depend on them to make those decisions at an arm's length from politics. Well, what if they were all subject to deciding whether you wanted one industry to survive or thrive or another, and that then becomes a political consideration that endangers our food, our water quality, and all of the levers of government. So I think it's actually more dangerous. And look, this has been an idea that's been around for at least the last 35 years in terms of the way the federal government functions. And so the idea is not new. What is new is that it's been put into writing, and you have potentially a president who would co-sign on that and proceed to act on what has been an idea for the last 35 years.
Kettering Foundation Senior Fellow, former FBI Director Jim Comey, former member of Congress and friend of Kettering, Donna Edwards. Thank you both for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.